What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Now, some of y'all may be wondering, JT, why the hell are you going live so late? You were supposed to be on here around an hour ago. Well, if I see you coming for Kellen DeBoer, the head coach of Alabama, I'm going to find you and get you together. And there was somebody on ESPN that was talking mad smack about Kellen DeBoer, and I couldn't let it slide. I had to address it. And for those of you guys who don't know the lore behind why I go so hard for Kellen DeBoer, my second semester of college, I literally paid a third of my tuition that semester straight betting on Washington and Kellen DeBoer during his final season when he led them all the way to the national championship. And ever since then, I've just been such a huge fan of his. If I see you saying something crazy about Kellen DeBoer, yeah, I'm going to come and get you some straightening, man. But this isn't about college football, at least tonight isn't. We got to talk about the NFL. Training camp is just around the corner. We're going to discuss the biggest storylines going into training camp. The Ravens have a revamped defense that could be arguably the best in the NFL. The Steelers, how improved is their offense going to be under new head coach Mike McCarthy? The Vikings are telling the biggest lie in the NFL right now. What's going to be the impact that Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker brings to the Chiefs offense? And the NFL is having a war with their own players over turf. And Tom Brady is entering his second season as the Raiders' minority owner, and he has a large say in everything that goes on within the organization. Are they finally heading in the right direction under Tom Brady's leadership? If you live, eat, breathe, sleep, and die football, congratulations, you have arrived at the right place. We're talking all things football, NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. Make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you can get your daily football fix in. Without further ado, let's dive into it. The NFL is at war with their own players over turf. And no, this isn't a gang war. They're at war with their players over their refusal to sacrifice using turf instead of actual grass. And how this came along was during the World Cup, which you had several World Cup matchups hosted at NFL stadiums that primarily used turf, that ended up swapping the turf for natural grass when they were hosting these World Cup games. And a bunch of NFL players got very triggered by this because they couldn't comprehend why these same NFL stadiums would change the grass for these World Cup games, but they refused to use real grass for the guys that bring in the millions and billions that this league generates every year revenue-wise. And for those of you guys who don't understand why this is such a big debate, players feel like part of the reason why they are at a higher risk of injury is because of the surface of the turf. Apparently, cutting on turf, just moving on turf, isn't the same as moving on actual grass. And these owners get paid millions, sometimes billions from the NFL. So you would think they have enough money in their pockets to pay for what it costs to instill actual grass into the stadiums. So for the NFL, you know, they're making so much money off these players, you would think they would care about what players want in order to stay healthy if it benefits their longevity. But this is one of the few things that the NFL is willing to bend on for some reason. Why does the NFL not care about changing the surface that their players play on if it ensures their health? Well, like a lot of things, this is about money. And with the NFL choosing to use turf instead of actual grass, these owners generate more money because turf is cheaper, it's more durable, and it's easier to maintain, and allows for you to have faster transitions when you have these NFL stadiums that host big events like concerts, wrestling matchups, and things of that magnitude. Meanwhile, if you just use permanent road grass, it limits how much year-round earning potential these stadiums can generate just with the difficulty of swapping out the grass with artificial turf and vice versa. Now, the player preference is to go to road grass, even though by doing that, the NFL and these owners would lose a little bit of profit and year-round convenience as far as how their stadiums are utilized. So the biggest reason why the NFL refuses to listen to their players and go to actual grass and they keep using this artificial turf is because the NFL cares more about money and revenue than they do the safety and the long-term health of their players. Analytically, there's nothing that proves that the surface that these players play on negates or elevates the amount of injury risk that they have to deal with every Sunday that they play. But these players, being the guys that are the actual ones sacrificing their bodies, putting their lives and their careers on the line, say that we feel like playing on grass allows us to have a safer playing experience than playing on turf. So instead of listening to the guys that are actually on the field, generating all the money for you, you choose to ignore them and further put these guys at risk as far as their livelihood and their long-term health. The NFL is trying to use all the data, any evidence they can find to support their logic against transitioning from turf to actual grass, because they don't care about the player's health. And that's always been the thing about the NFL. The NFL, their biggest problem is they're too reactive instead of being proactive, right? Think about why the NFL comes down so hard when it comes to concussion protocol, CTE, because 2 decades ago, the NFL didn't really give a hoot about any of that until their pockets started to hurt because of it. Once you started to get all this new information about concussions, the long-term impacts of concussions, and then the new studies, the new information that emerged about CTE, and then all the lawsuits that started to come for the NFL and all the billions that they lost settling those cases, the NFL was forced to have to be reactive and change their rules so they can ensure the safety of their game and to ensure that they didn't lose as much money to lawsuits because of concussions and CTE than now. And the same thing is going to happen when it comes to turf. Eventually, you're going to have enough science and enough data that backs that playing on actual grass is beneficial to the player's long-term health than playing on turf. But by that point, it's going to be too late, and the NFL is already going to be paying out billions due to the injuries that these players have suffered playing on these playing surfaces. And that's always been the biggest issue with the NFL. Instead of being proactive and getting ahead of these issues before they encapsulate into bigger, worser issues that cost them billions in lawsuits, they only wait until it becomes too little, too late, and then they take action. But by that point, they're already down millions. Why even allow it to get to that point when you can get ahead of it, be proactive, and just listen to the players? After all, these guys are the moneymakers for your league. And the biggest reason why the FIFA World Cup plays on actual grass and not turf is because the FIFA players actually prefer that. The NFL doesn't have, the same relationship as far as their players go. It really is a leverage thing. The NFL holds all the cards in these situations, and the NFL rarely makes changes simply because players want them. Jerry Jones, when he was asked about the differences in turf versus actual grass, he said that if they were to use real grass at the Cowboys' current stadium, it would run him about $250,000 per package that he would need delivered. And then it would not allow the Cowboys to maximize the amount of profits they can get due to them always having to deal with the hassle of having actual grass. So the NFL refuses to appease their players, and the NFL refuses to let these players play on actual grass and risk their health playing on turf, all because they want to save money and they want to be cheap, even though they generate billions every single year and they have more than enough to be able to pay what it costs to maintain the fees and the maintenance of actual grass. But instead, they just care about the revenue, they care about the profits, and they don't care about the guys who are responsible for all these profits that they're generating. It's just completely outrageous, the lack of care the NFL seems to have as far as maintaining the livelihood and the longevity of their players' careers. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you live, eat, breathe, sleep, and die football. We're talking NFL, college football, 247, 365 days throughout the year. If you are a football junkie, you can't go a day without getting your football fix in. Make sure that you are subscribed and you have post notifications turned on if you haven't already. Remember, we are not just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find this episode along with all of our other episodes in audio format wherever you get your podcast from, Apple, Spotify. The links are down in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support the grind, give us a 5-star review. Helps us out a lot, helps us grow, helps us get more exposure. Once again, the links are down in the description below. As a diehard Steelers fan for going on 17 years now, the worst part of my Sundays the last 5 years has been watching the Steelers offense. Aaron Rodgers last season, he provided something that the Steelers haven't had since Big Ben retired, which is some stable quarterback play. And while the quarterback play was solid, the rest of the offense was too predictable. There wasn't enough answers for Aaron Rodgers. It was really just DK Metcalf, Pat Frymuth, and Kenneth Gainwell, and then a bunch of randos stepping up every single week, which eventually led to the Steelers, like always, going to the playoffs and being an easy one-and-done team. So with Mike Tomlin stepping down, Mike McCarthy coming in to replace him, Mike McCarthy is viewed as an offensive version of Mike Tomlin. Now, to me, I hear that, and that's music to my ears, because I'd rather have the offensive version of Mike Tomlin, somebody that can actually get the most out of the side of the ball that the Steelers have struggled on, versus having a guy in Mike Tomlin who's supposed to be a defensive-minded coach, and yet, despite having the NFL's most expensive defense, that side of the ball is underperforming. So I'm very excited about what this Steelers team is going to be with Mike McCarthy being in charge of running the show, somebody that actually has a clear understanding of what a functional offense looks like. Because last year, while the Steelers offense was probably the best it's been in the last half a decade, you obviously could see the ceiling that it had. They finished 25th in total offense. They were 26th in rushing yards per game, and no wide receiver outside of DK Metcalf caught more than 31 passes. And Aaron Rodgers, despite how well he played, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, in my opinion, he carried the Steelers to the AFC North title in the playoffs. He didn't have enough answers, and that limited how good Aaron Rodgers truly could have been. Because outside of DK Metcalf and Pat Frymuth and occasionally Kenneth Gainwell making a big play, catching the ball out of the backfield, there wasn't really anything that defenses had to be afraid of. Because the Steelers didn't really have any firepower that made defenses afraid. So you could just stack the box, set out against the run, and just focus on DK Metcalf. And then that pretty much was the key to stopping the Steelers' offense. So this offseason, what the Steelers had to do was find more answers for Aaron Rodgers. And they did that. They traded for Michael Pittman, who gives Aaron Rodgers a dependable possession target who can do a lot of dirty work underneath. Mike McCarthy and the Steelers offensive staff, they plan on moving Michael Pittman around a lot. He's not just going to be playing outside receiver. He's going to be used as a big slot in certain situations, and just trying to find different ways to create exploitable matchups to get Michael Pittman the ball, since Michael Pittman is a better all-around wide receiver than what DK Metcalf is. And with Michael Pittman being more of the underneath, we're going to ask you to get the dirty yards for us kind of receiver, that's going to take some attention off DK Metcalf, and you set up DK Metcalf for more opportunities to do what he does best, generate explosive plays in the pass game, rather that be being a good option deep downfield, or finding ways to get him the ball with the short passing game, bubble screens, drags. With a guy like DK Metcalf, he's at his best when he's able to be a complementary wide receiver versus being the primary wide receiver, because that's never been part of DK Metcalf's game. Not only did you give Aaron Rodgers Michael Pittman, but you also blessed him with who I believe was the third best rookie wide receiver in this past year's draft, and German Bernard out of Alabama. And I watch a lot of SEC football. Last year, German Bernard, in my opinion, was the best player on Alabama. Even though he isn't a high-level athlete, this guy has a very high football IQ. He knows how to find the open spaces in zone coverage. He has very reliable hands, and despite not being a burner, this guy has elite acceleration. It doesn't take him that long to get the top end speed, and he brings an element to this offense that the Steelers have been lacking since the peak of Juju Smith-Schuster, which is somebody that can generate a lot of yards after catch. So with Aaron Rodgers having German Bernard and Michael Pittman added to the receiver room alongside of DK Metcalf, he has more answers than what he had last year. Last year, it was one or two guys, and if those guys were boxed, then there was no plays to be made. Now with Michael Pittman, German Bernard alongside of DK and Pat Freiermuth, there are plenty of answers for Aaron Rodgers to go with the football, which should lead to the Steelers being more efficient and a lot more successful in third down situations and inside the red zone. Because once you get inside the red zone, that's really when your personnel, how good, how bad it is, truly gets revealed. And last season, the Steelers had one of the worst offensive personnels in the entirety of the league, which is why I felt Aaron Rodgers was a lot better than what a lot of people give him credit for. It also didn't help that Aaron Rodgers, as old as what he is, had a run game that was 26 in rushing yards per game. When you have a quarterback of his age and you can't support him with a dependable ground game, not only are you setting him up for failure, but you're setting him up to have his career ended prematurely. This dude is one big hit stick away from it being over. So the Steelers, what they did this offseason is they went and they signed Rico Dowdle, who's coming off his second consecutive 1,000-yard campaign. And Rico Dowdle had a stretch during last season with the Panthers when this dude was completely taking over the league. The guy was averaging nearly 200 yards per contest, running the football, catching that thing. He was a man amongst boys. And then, after a while, he started to cool off a little bit. He reunites with Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy helped Rico Dowdle have a breakout year 2 years ago, the last time they were together in Dallas. So now with Rico Dowdle in the running back room, the Steelers have one of the better running back rooms in the NFL. You got Jaylen Warren. He's going to be a good 1-2 punch with Rico Dowdle. Their skill sets both complement each other perfectly. Jaylen Warren is more so a good scat back. He's a guy that can generate a lot of chunk plays on the ground. Meanwhile, Rico Dowdle is more so your grinder. Isn't going to rip off as many big runs as what Jaylen Warren can, but he's going to be your good short yardage back. He's going to be the guy that probably gets a lot of the work inside of the red zone, on the goal line. And then I'm still a believer in Caleb Johnson. There's a role for him in this offense. So now Aaron Rodgers has some receivers to throw the football to, and a ground game that can take some of the pressure off of him. Now the Steelers can actually play complementary football. Now you can actually have a good passing attack and a good run game alongside of having a competent play caller. Because say what you want to about Mike McCarthy being the white version of Mike Tomlin, I'd rather have him than running back with Mike Tomlin again and have to be tortured for 3 hours every Sunday watching Arthur Smith's abysmal play calling. Now, sure, Arthur Smith was much better than Matt Canada and Randy Fichtner, but not by that big of a margin. So I'm just very excited about the breath of fresh air that's walking into the building as far as the Steelers' offensive improvements goes. And overall, with everything that the Steelers have on the offense side of the ball coming into this season, I wouldn't be shocked if we see Aaron Rodgers have one of the best seasons that we've ever seen a quarterback in his final year in the NFL have, because this guy had 24 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in spite of having one of the worst offensive personnel around him. Now you have one of the worst offensive personnel that has improved to, pretty solid, not one of the best, but at least top 15-ish. I don't think it's crazy to see Aaron Rodgers somewhat having an MVP season, because Aaron Rodgers last year was the MVP of the Steelers. If the most valuable player award truly met what it was supposed to mean, Aaron Rodgers should have been in the MVP discussion last year, because you take Aaron Rodgers off the Steelers, that is not a playoff team. So you reunite Aaron Rodgers with the guy responsible for his career being what it is right now. I'm very confident that the Steelers have enough offensively to, at best, be a borderline top 10 offense. And at worst, this is a solid, average, slightly above average offense. You'll take that. With all the talent they have on defense, the Steelers have always hung their hat on defense anyway. But at least this is an offense that doesn't feel like you're going into a gunfight with a plastic knife. Now, what determines if the Steelers reach their ceiling on offense or not this year is going to be their offensive line. Now, the offensive line, in my opinion, was all right. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. But it was an improvement from what you've seen out of this offensive line in years prior. Troy Fautanu is moving from right tackle to left guard with Broderick Jones on the mend, recovering from his injury. We don't know how right guard and right tackle are going to pan out. That's going to be decided in training camp. But if the Steelers can keep Aaron Rodgers upright, this should, at the bare minimum, make this a top 15 offense. At least that's the floor. And I think the ceiling is you're a borderline top 10 unit. And if this offensive line plays well, then Aaron Rodgers could end up playing good enough to where the Steelers could actually win a playoff game this year. And that's really what's going to decide if this season is a success or a failure. Can the Steelers finally end their near decade-long drought without a playoff win? That's all Steelers fans want this year. The Steelers winning a playoff game this year would kind of feel like winning the damn Super Bowl, the Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Even though it wouldn't equate to winning the actual Super Bowl, it would kind of feel like it, because when you go so long without a postseason win, yeah, you would love to have one. Even if you know you don't have a shot at going anywhere further after it happens, you just would love to actually feel a little bit of some optimism about the team, about the direction of the franchise, because they actually were finally able to deliver on some postseason success. And I think with the improvement that the Steelers have made this offseason on offense, improving wide receiver with Michael Pittman, drafting Jerry Bernard, adding Rico Dowdle at running back to complement Jaylen Warren, as long as his offensive line is at least above average, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be good enough for the Steelers to finally win a playoff game for a change. When it comes to the Baltimore Ravens, right? Everybody saw how bad the Ravens defense played last season, mainly against the pass. They were 30th in pass yards per game allowed. And they think me putting the Ravens as the second best defense going into this season It's crazy, but it's actually not. And, a few days ago, if you guys haven't seen this, I released my projections for who the top 10 defenses were going to be this season coming up. And I felt like outside the Houston Texans that the Baltimore Ravens, with the hiring of Jesse Minter as their new defensive coordinator, was going to be what finally gets this Ravens defense looking like the defense that we normally have grown accustomed to expecting this franchise to have. Because after all, when you think of the Baltimore Ravens, when they're at their best, they normally always have an elite defense. And last season, their defense was a far cry from that. But this season, though, with Jesse Minter coming in, who essentially runs the same defense that Mike McDonald runs, not blitz heavy, a lot of combo coverages, a lot of reliance on the defensive lineman, your front four getting home, your corners playing aggressive in coverage, using a guy like a Kyle Hamilton for his versatility, playing near the line of scrimmage as like another linebacker, and then occasionally being asked to drop back in coverage, man up against a tight end, a running back, or a slot receiver. There's no reason why I don't think the Ravens can't have the second best defense in the NFL this year. This defense already has the talent. If we are just talking about pure talent, the Ravens are one of the most talented defenses in the NFL. They got all the names. Marlon Humphrey, former All-Pro. You got Nate Wiggins, who had a phenomenal rookie season, regressed last season somewhat. Mekhi Starks was really good last season. And then you signed Trey Hendrickson in free agency. You potentially could get Madubuike back. You got Roquan Smith. There are a lot of great players that Jesse Minter is inheriting, taking over this Ravens defense. And his last two seasons, being the Chargers defensive coordinator, he coached that unit to be in top 10, despite them not having as much talent as what he's taken over, taking this Baltimore Ravens head coaching job. Last season, under Jesse Minter's play calling, the Chargers defense was top 10 in every statistical category on that side of the ball. They were top 10 in points per game allowed, yards per game allowed, top 10 stopping the pass and the run, and they also, to add a cherry on top, were top 10 in takeaways. And a lot of the areas that the Chargers were good at on defense were a lot of the areas that you saw the Ravens struggle in last season. And their inability to stop the pass was the main reason why they found themselves out of the playoffs, because they couldn't get a consistent pass rush going. They were one of the worst teams at getting after the quarterback. And they also couldn't find a way to get home without having to send extra pressure. And the defense, in spite of all the talent that they had on that side of the ball, Zach Orr, who was their previous defensive play calling, wasn't completely maxing out the amount of talent that they had on that side of the ball. Jesse Minter, he fixes the exact weaknesses that this Ravens defense had exposed last season. If you can produce back-to-back consecutive top 10 defenses and points per game allowed, you're an elite defensive mind. And with Jesse Minter now, I think the Ravens are finally going to get back to playing the style of football we expect for this franchise to play with. Being physical, prioritizing, dominating the line of scrimmage, being able to control the trenches, and just playing with a lot of violence. That's normally how elite Ravens defenses play like. With the addition of Trey Hendrickson, the Ravens solved their pass rush problem. As long as this is the Trey Hendrickson that was putting up 17.5 sacks with the Saints and the Cincinnati Bengals. With Madubuike coming back, you're going to have one of the best interior defensive linemen fully healthy. Travis Jones, he's another guy who could win one-on-one on the interior. And then Mike Green, Zion Young, I think one of those guys is going to end up breaking out. So with the talent that the Ravens possess on the defensive line, they're going to be able to do what is a core staple of Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald's defense, which is guys on the front being able to create a lot of havoc, being able to destroy the one-on-one matchups. We know what Madubuike can do. Isn't this guy a former All-Pro? We know what Trey Hendrickson can do. So you have guys that can win their one-on-one matchups, which should allow the secondary to improve. Guys like Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins to have bounce-back seasons because they won't be in coverage as long as what they were last season. And two, you're going to have a defensive guy that actually knows the best way to properly employ these players to get the most out of them. Nate Wiggins, what Zach Orr was asking him to do was not his strengths. It kind of played into his weaknesses, and that's why he had a sophomore slump last year. Marlon Humphrey is coming off the worst season of his career. I don't think Marlon Humphrey is trash. I do think he has regressed somewhat due to father time and age, but Marlon Humphrey has always been one of the more versatile players in the league. You can play him at safety. You can play him outside at boundary corner. He can play it in the slot. There's a variety of different ways Jesse Minter is going to be able to find to use Marlon Humphrey. And I think that the most underrated part about the Ravens defense and why I expect this to be the second best defense in the league is how good their safeties are. Malachi Starks and Kyle Hamilton unlock everything that Jesse Minter wants to do defensively his first season in Baltimore. Kyle Hamilton is going to become Jesse Minter's version of what Derwin James was when he was their defensive coordinator for the past 2 years. Derwin James and Kyle Hamilton both have a lot of similarities. They both are incredibly versatile. They're great in coverage, and they're also great acting like a fourth or fifth linebacker when you employ them around the line of scrimmage. And that's why I feel the floor for this Ravens defense this year, at the bare minimum, this is going to be a top 10 defense. The ceiling, this is debatably the best defense in football, up there rivaling the Houston Texans. That's how good this defense should be with Jesse Minter taking over. And the reason why the Ravens hired Jesse Minter, in my opinion, was because they still feel a lot of regret not rolling the dice and hiring Mike McDonald, promoting him to being the full-time head coach when they had the opportunity, because it was kind of hard to pull the trigger in that scenario because you're going to fire one of the longest tenured coaches in NFL history, fresh off an AFC championship berth, for an unproven defensive coordinator. We know he's a good DC, but is he just as good, if not better, as a head coach? Well, we found that out with the Seahawks just winning it all this past year, a few months ago. So if you are the Baltimore Ravens, you see all the success that the Seahawks have had with Mike McDonald, and you're saying, you know what, let's go back to the basics and bring in Jesse Minter. Jesse Minter has already been familiar with a lot of players that are currently on the roster because he was assistant with the Baltimore Ravens a few years ago. And then the Harbaugh brothers ended up having some kind of unofficial trade where the Ravens got Mike McDonald, and Jim Harbaugh, who was at Michigan at the time, he got Jesse Minter. And one thing about the Harbaugh brothers, they always have a good eye for good coaches, good coordinators, good assistants. Their coaching trees are really phenomenal. Even if the guys they hire don't turn out to be great head coaches, they at least are very good in the side of the ball that they specialize at. So I don't think it's far-fetched or delusional to expect the Ravens to have the second best defense in football this year. The talent is already there. Last season, it just was underutilized because Zach Orr didn't know how to get the most out of this personnel. And I always say that football is just as mental as it is physical. It's like a chess game. And these coaches, these play callers, they're the chess players. These players are the pawns that their play calling allows them to move around. The better the play caller, the better you see these players perform at, because you have a coach that knows how to put them in the right spots to win the game. So I'm expecting the Ravens to have the second best defense in the NFL this year. You can call me crazy, you can call me delusional all you want to, but the talent's already there. Now it just comes down to Jesse Minter being able to put these players in the right situations to succeed, which I believe he will, because he did it with the Chargers, and that defense didn't have remotely the same amount of talent as what he's inheriting year one, taking over the Baltimore Ravens as head coach. The biggest lie in the NFL right now, as we prepare for the start of training camp, is the Minnesota Vikings pretending that they have a quarterback battle going on between J.J. McCarthy and Kyler Murray. Can we just stop the charade? Are we truly believing that J.J. McCarthy is good enough to beat out Kyler Murray? And I get that a lot of you guys are not big fans of Kyler Murray, but the Vikings don't need Kyler Murray to be Lamar Jackson, to be Joe Burrow. They just need him to be 10 times better than J.J. McCarthy. And that's not too hard because Kyler Murray has already proved that he's 10 times better than J.J. McCarthy just based off his body of work that he's put in front of us in his last few years in the league. And at one point, Kyler Murray was one of the best ascending young quarterbacks in the NFL. How quickly we forget how good Kyler Murray was, how much improvement he made his first 3 years in the league. He was Offensive Rookie of the Year his first season. He was a multiple-time Pro Bowl selection. And midway throughout his third season, he was the runaway leader for MVP until the Arizona Cardinals crashed back down to earth during the second half of that same season, eventually losing to the Rams in a wildcard round, who will go on to win the Super Bowl that season. So Kyler Murray has already shown that he can play good football. Just like when Sam Darnold was playing for the Jets, he wasn't all bad. He had moments when he showed he can be a good quarterback in the league. So I expect for Kyler Murray this year to be this year's Sam Darnold. You look at J.J. McCarthy, we don't really have a lot of moments that give us a lot of optimism that this guy has what it takes to lead the Vikings to the playoffs this year. And the excuses you can make for J.J. McCarthy is, well, this guy was young. It was really his first year as a starter since his rookie season. His official rookie season got cut short due to an injury he suffered in the preseason. I get all that. He's a young player. He has to go out there, make mistakes, because that's the only way he's going to get better, by providing more repetition. But the Vikings are not in a situation to allow a young quarterback to develop when you have a team that is built to win now. And the J.J. McCarthy situation is the same exact situation that the 49ers were in a few years ago with Trey Lance. Guys like Justin Jefferson don't give a damn about having a young quarterback that needs time to develop. This brother wants to win. And if he has to wait for a young quarterback to figure it out, you know what he's going to do? He's going to go up to Kevin O'Connell and say, hey, man, trade me. I don't got time to waste my career waiting for a guy to figure it out who just might not ever figure it out, because J.J. McCarthy is never going to figure it out. And I know there's a lot of J.J. McCarthy fanboys. You got the 9 troopers out there. But let's just be honest. J.J. McCarthy had no business being the 10th pick of the draft that he was selected in a few years ago. I never understood the J.J. McCarthy hype. This guy was a handoff merchant at Michigan. Literally, there was a game they played against Penn State that they won, and in the game running the football 30 straight damn times. J.J. McCarthy was not that good. But because of the physical tools, the arm, the athleticism, he ended up fooling the Minnesota Vikings into believing that, you know, if we sit this guy for a year, we can take advantage of having him on a rookie deal, and it will allow us to take full advantage of our Super Bowl window, because your Super Bowl window is the widest when you have a young ascending quarterback on a rookie contract, because it gives you more salary cap flexibility and you can sign more big names at positions of need in free agency, because you're not allocating a large chunk of your salary cap to paying an expensive quarterback. But that only works if the young quarterback you have is good, and J.J. McCarthy isn't good. He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. The only good thing about J.J. McCarthy that you can hang your hat on is that this dude does play well late in the fourth quarter with the game on his line. I've never seen a quarterback play better with a few minutes left to go in the fourth than what he does in the first 3 quarters. It's a 4-quarter game. It's a 60-minute game. And for some reason, J.J. McCarthy only plays his best in the final closing minutes. It's really weird. But the Minnesota Vikings are not in a position right now to wait on J.J. McCarthy to figure it out. Because not only do you have a team that's built to win, but you also have a head coach that could be coaching for his job this year. So if you are in Kevin O'Connell's shoes and you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, who do you trust with your job this season? J.J. McCarthy or Kyler Murray? I don't see how you don't say Kyler Murray, because how can you trust a guy with your job in his hands that finished with 11 touchdowns and 12 interceptions? You know, it's just so funny that you listen to Kevin O'Connell go out on some of these talk shows, and he says we have two quarterbacks that we have a lot of confidence in, and you just laugh because he's obviously lying. Because if you had two quarterbacks that you had confidence in, one of those guys wouldn't be in the building right now. If you truly had confidence that J.J. McCarthy was that guy, you would have had no reason to have to sign Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, sure, he's playing on a veteran minimum. He's not a great quarterback, but he's not J.J. McCarthy bad either. The Vikings won 9 games last year in spite of how bad their quarterback play was. And that was outside of J.J. McCarthy. You had Max Brosmer and you had Carson Wentz. And then, two, you got a quarterback that still has a lot to prove, that also can't stay healthy, that has durability concerns. All the Minnesota Vikings are doing right now by lying to us all that they have a true quarterback battle going down between J.J. McCarthy and Kyler Murray is further setting themselves back, because once the season starts, all those reps that Kyler Murray should have been taking, that he wasn't allowed to get because you were having this fake quarterback battle between him and J.J. McCarthy, is not going to allow him to get out to a fast start, because he's not going to be able to establish the timing, the chemistry necessary to hit the ground running come week 1, because you took that away from him. And the more you continue to have this fake quarterback competition, the more reps you take away from Kyler Murray to continue to get comfortable, to continue to get acclimated to his teammates, therefore setting yourselves back to where you could see the Minnesota Vikings have a slow start to the season, and then by the time Kyler Murray truly settles in, it's already too little too late. And I also think the only reason why members of the Minnesota Vikings organization and Minnesota fans that still believe in J.J. McCarthy actually believe in him is more so because they don't want the first round pick that they used on J.J. McCarthy to go to waste. They want to find some way, somehow, to get some value out of that. And that's understandable, because you don't want to admit that you wasted the first round pick. First round picks are incredibly valuable, especially when you use one on a quarterback. But as the old saying goes, you got to know when to hold them and you got to know when to fold them. And right now, I just think that the Minnesota Vikings need to cut this whole charade about them having a quarterback battle, because they're not having a quarterback battle. There's nothing that they're battling for. Every single player in that Vikings locker room knows that Kyler Murray is QB1, because every player in that locker room saw J.J. McCarthy last year and knew this guy wasn't it. You had Justin Jefferson quitting on routes because he was just frustrated and tired of J.J. McCarthy. And you got people criticizing his leadership, criticizing his character. If you're Justin Jefferson, you go from Kirk Cousins to Sam Darnold all of a sudden to some of the worst quarterback play in the league with J.J. McCarthy, you want to be frustrated either? These guys want to make plays. It's not their job to develop a quarterback. It's not their job to be patient. It's their job to go out there and make plays. And they want the quarterback who gives them the best chance to do that. And J.J. McCarthy doesn't. Kyler Murray does. So what are we doing here? Why are we wasting time trying to lie to ourselves that J.J. McCarthy is franchise quarterback material? When the brother was hitting the football off 30 straight consecutive times against Penn State, that showed me everything that I needed to know. The one game that Michigan told J.J. McCarthy to go carry the team on his shoulders and win, they lost. And that's when they got upset their first time making it to the CFP against TCU. J.J. McCarthy is not it. I don't get why they're trying to string this thing along, trying to make it out to be something that it's not. This is not a quarterback competition. It is not. This is Kyler Murray's job to lose. Now, J.J. McCarthy surprises us. Hey, I'd rather be wrong than actually be right in that situation. But I think we all know, and we can all see the writing on the wall when it comes to J.J. McCarthy. This was a guy that was drafted a lot higher than what he should have been, because you had the FOMO for quarterback. A lot of teams have this quarterback FOMO. They have this fear of missing out on a potential franchise quarterback. So they find ways to sell themselves on a guy who shouldn't be drafted as high as what this team is going to draft him, just out of desperation to not miss out on drafting a potential franchise quarterback. It is completely ridiculous what the Vikings are doing right now. Let's just stop this charade and just come out and publicly admit that Kyler Murray is the starting quarterback and let this brother get the reps that he needs to give the Vikings the best chance to have a bounce-back season, winning the division, and getting back to the playoffs and saving your damn job if you're Kevin O'Connell. Stop the lies, man. The Rams super team hype seemed to make everybody forget how good the San Francisco 49ers are. Why are the 49ers being treated as an afterthought in spite of winning 12 games last season, in spite of the majority of their team, the majority of their best players being on IR, watching the rest of the 49ers season from the hospital room? Brock Purdy missed a good chunk of the season. You have Fred Warner, Nick Bosa have their seasons cut short. Not just two of the 49ers' best players on defense, but two of the best players in the NFL at their respective positions had their seasons cut short. And yet, in spite of all the constant injuries that the 49ers had to deal with last season, Kyle Shanahan, being the elite coach that he is, was still able to will the 49ers to a 12-win season and to the playoffs. And yeah, sure, they did lose to the divisional foe, but if they would have had Fred Warner and Nick Bosa and they were at full strength, we're having a completely different conversation. You are judging the 49ers, or let me rephrase this. Everybody is sleeping on the 49ers because they're judging this team based off the last game they played not being fully healthy, and they are forgetting just how good this team actually is when they're at full strength. Everybody forgets how hard it is to win 12 games in the NFL. It's even more difficult to do that when you're without the best linebacker in the NFL, when you're without one of the best pass rushers in the NFL over the last 5-6 years. But for some reason, though, Kyle Shanahan is being punished for success. This is the only head coach that gets so much overwhelming criticism for making it to 4 NFC championship games and 2 Super Bowls, not being able to win them, in spite 90% of the other head coaches that are in the league right now not even having anywhere close to a resume like his. Kyle Shanahan, last season, he put on a coaching masterclass. This dude beat the Rams with Mac Jones. Think about that. He beat the Rams with Mac Jones. And we think because the Rams, they added Myles Garrett, this just all of a sudden means that we should even have the season. We should just go ahead, cancel the season, and just give the Rams a Super Bowl right now because nobody else has a shot at being able to beat them. Like, the best teams on paper don't always win it all, people. The 2007 New England Patriots, one of the most dominant teams, if not the most dominant regular season team in NFL history, lost to one of the biggest underdogs in Super Bowl history, the New York Giants. Games aren't won on paper. They're not won on OurLens.com. They are won on the field. And I think when the 49ers play the Rams this year in the regular season and possibly in the playoffs, they're going to be able to have a better shot of beating them and upsetting them than what they're given credit for right now. I think that the 49ers right now are the most disrespected team in the NFL at the moment. Sure, the Rams getting Myles Garrett and Trent McDuffie definitely makes them the favorites. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying any other team should be favorite to win the Super Bowl over the Rams. But we seem to forget that the 49ers already had a Super Bowl caliber team. And now they do nothing but get those guys back fully healthy, and Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, and they also added more talent on top of what they already had. They traded for Isaiah Dugazua, who's going to add more interior pressure alongside of Nick Bosa. Then you also signed Mike Evans in free agency. Now you got him, Ricky Pearsall, potentially George Kittle, CMC. Like the Rams, sure, they added Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson, but I don't think Jalen Watson can shut down Ricky Pearsall or Mike Evans. I don't think that the Rams have this defense that's going to be the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens. There are points that can be scored on this defense, even with the additional Myles Garrett. Hell, everybody's talking about Myles Garrett. We seem to forget that the 49ers have one of the greatest left tackles ever that's going to be blocking this dude, and Trent Williams. You know, the gap between the Rams and the 49ers and the Seahawks is a lot smaller than what everybody thinks. Everybody's getting so focused on this super team hype that they are overlooking just how good the other rivals in their division truly are. The Seahawks, they could upset the Rams in the playoffs. The 49ers, I think, have the best shot out of anybody in the NFC to possibly stop the Rams from going all the way, just because I think that they truly have the most complete roster outside of the Rams in the NFC, because not only do they have high-level starters, but they also have a lot of great depth. And I think that's the biggest improvement that the 49ers made this offseason, which was adding depth at every position possible. You wonder why they drafted Dejon Stribbling so high when they already had so many good receivers, because with the 49ers, with the bad injury luck they've had, you could never have too many good players at a certain position. If you're the 49ers, you need to double dip at every doggone position. So you're deep at wide receiver, you're deep on the O-line, you got a good backup quarterback that can keep your season alive, and Brock Purdy, unfortunately, has to miss time due with injuries, and you got a lot of depth at every single position on defense. So while the Rams may be the better team at the top, I feel like overall the 49ers have better depth, and I just think that they can survive the battle of attrition a lot better than what the Rams can. Are you really sure that Matthew Stafford is going to be able to last the entirety of this season? Because last season, I thought there was no way in hell this brother was not going to get injured when this dude was taking epidural shots right before the season. You know, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, but even if everything goes right for the Rams, they could still lose to the 49ers, because the last team that you want to see in the postseason is the team that you already seen twice in the regular season. And Kyle Shanahan, he has Sean McVay's number. You know, we forget just how good the 49ers were in spite of all these injuries. And now they get everybody back fully healthy, plus they add more talent on top of that, and they're just a third wheel in the NFC West. Come on now, we got to put some more respect on the San Francisco 49ers. We got to put some more respect on Kyle Shanahan. This guy isn't new to this. He's true to this. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications. If you live, eat, breathe, sleep, and die football, we're talking NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you have a question or a topic that you would like answered or discussed in a future episode, follow us at JTSports_. Hit us up in the DMs, add us on Instagram, X, and TikTok. We will respond. We read all DMs, all interactions that we get. And also, keep up to date with everything that's going on with the show. Follow us at JTSports_. It's where you can find us on Instagram, X, and TikTok, along with Facebook. We got a few more things to dive into before we get up on out of here. I ranked the Chiefs signing Kenneth Walker during free agency as the fourth most impactful offseason move on the Super Bowl race. And it's not simply because Kenneth Walker improves the Chiefs' offense. I think it's a lot bigger than that, because the Chiefs' offense has always been pretty good. But last year, you know, the wheels kind of fell off, because the way that the Chiefs have been successful on offense the last couple of years more so was due to the Patrick Mahomes magic than it was the play calling being A1, the offensive line being A1, the receivers being great. Patrick Mahomes last season, he was carrying the Chiefs on his back. And eventually it got to a point Patrick Mahomes couldn't carry the Chiefs anymore, because there was just too much weight that the Chiefs were putting on his shoulders. You were asking this dude to carry a run game that lacked any kind of explosiveness. You watch Kareem Hunt run, and he would make you believe that you were faster than him. This dude's top gear had to be at least 9 miles per hour. And Isaiah Pacheco, he came into the league looking nice, and then after that injury, he never was the same. And the Chiefs' inability to run the football ultimately was their downfall last year because they had no offense outside of Patrick Mahomes. Now, with Patrick Mahomes coming back this season off that ACL injury, the Chiefs can't just simply rush this brother back, have him play week 1, and then ask him to do the same thing that they were asking him to do the last 2 years, carry the Chiefs offense on the shoulders. You can't ask that. You at least have to give Patrick Mahomes at least a month and some change to ease him into it, because you don't want to have a guy coming fresh off an ACL injury who really shouldn't be playing in week 1, but the only reason he will is because it's Patrick Mahomes and he's not human. But even then, even if Patrick Mahomes truly is an alien and he's from a different planet than this one, you can't have this brother throwing for 30, 40 plus with no run game, fresh off an injury of that magnitude. So I expect for, instead of the Chiefs offense revolving around Patrick Mahomes and the Patrick Mahomes magic, I expect this offense to be built around Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker, I think right now, is the Chiefs' second best player on the team. Not the second best player that they have on offense. He is the second best player that they currently have on this team right now. Because you look at the weapons that the Chiefs have on offense, who really do they have? Rashee Rice is okay. Travis Kelce is still okay. He can still contribute, but Kenneth Walker is the guy that can take over a game for you outside of Patrick Mahomes. He can open the rest of your offense up. He can make your offense less predictable than what it was last season. And also, he's the home run threat that the Chiefs need late in these ball games. Instead of saying, hey, Mahomes, go win us the game, go save us like you always do, you can say, hey, man, like, let's throw a curveball. Let's throw a fast pitch in there. Let's throw a slow ball in there and mix things up. Let's tell Kenneth Walker to go win us the game. Let's tell this brother, hey, we're going to give you 8 carries in the fourth quarter and the final 4 minutes, and we want you to go call a game for us. Kenneth Walker can do that. Kenneth Walker, just with the explosiveness that he has, just the home run threat ability, it brings a different dynamic to the Chiefs offense that they haven't had really since Tyreek Hill, because you now have somebody that this offense can flow through outside of Patrick Mahomes. And I think that's very important as the Chiefs enter the third phase of their dynasty, because here's the truth. Patrick Mahomes is not regressing. Patrick Mahomes last season really should have won MVP if we give MVP to who truly is deserving of it. And Patrick Mahomes was asked to carry a deeply flawed offense for 14 games. The Chiefs were 24th and rushing yards per game allowed. Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt provided pretty much second to no run game at all. And once Patrick Mahomes was injured, the season was entirely over for the Chiefs at that point. Kenneth Walker is part of the Chiefs' rehabilitation plan for Patrick Mahomes. Kansas City isn't going to ask a guy coming off an ACL and an LCL tear to throw for 40, 50 times and continue to improvise the way that he has before. You're not finna ask somebody playing on a bulky-ass knee brace to be running around trying to extend plays, buy time for guys to get it happen, or buy time for guys to get open. That's where Kenneth Walker comes in. Kenneth Walker allows for the Chiefs to easy up the workload for the first opening month of the season. And the fewer opportunities you ask Patrick Mahomes to have to go out there and ask him to do that Patrick Mahomes voodoo, the more you can get out of it, because you're not going to put a lot of strain on his body. And I think that early during the season, the identity for Kansas City this year is not going to be relying on the Patrick Mahomes magic. It's going to be relying Kenneth Walker to be that workhorse back for us. And I think that Kenneth Walker could easily be good enough to be an all-pro level running back this year, because the talent has always been there. It's just the opportunities haven't really presented themselves, because he's always kind of been in a running back committee. He's kind of always been sharing the workload with guys like a Zach Charbonnet. So now with this guy having the backfield and no competition really behind him but Emma Johnson to spell him out, I think that Kenneth Walker, if he ends up panning out like how he should for Kansas City, we could easily see the Chiefs having a bounce back season and find themselves right back in the AFC Championship, because Kenneth Walker changes the Super Bowl recipe for Kansas City. It no longer is, hey, Patrick Mahomes, go save us. It now is, hey, Patrick Mahomes, we're going to ask Kenneth Walker to be the primary focus of our offense, and then you just, be good enough when we need you to in certain moments. So I look at the Kenneth Walker signing, and I think that it's going to be the fourth most impactful offseason move of this upcoming season. Because if Kenneth Walker pans out, I think the Chiefs could find themselves in position to win the AFC West again, and a team that nobody wants to see in the playoffs, no matter if you play them on the road or if you got to play them at home, because a guy like Kenneth Walker is what the Chiefs need in this third phase of this dynasty, where they have to find an identity on offense outside of Patrick Mahomes. That's what Kenneth Walker is going to provide. My guy Southside Sex Dome says, I recall you being a Steelers fan when I discovered your channel 5-6 years ago. I don't know. Sometimes when I just talk, man, I just speak as if me, because if I'm somebody that believes in the take and nobody else believes in, I'm going to say us. It's just one of those kinds of things. Don't think too much of it, man. I got one more thing I want to get off my chest before we get up on out of here. For the Las Vegas Raiders, this season coming up is going to be one of the most important seasons in the history of their franchise. And it's not because they're expected to compete for the Super Bowl, or they're expected to compete for the division, they're expected to be a playoff team. It's honestly the opposite. The biggest problem with the Raiders these last 4 years is that they haven't had any direction at all. It's just been 1 year rentals. You hire Pete Carroll and then you fire him. Where's the long-term direction if you fired him after 1 year? Same thing with Antonio Pierce. He was the one and done. Where's the long-term direction? Josh McDaniels lasted 2 years and some change. Where's the long-term direction? Now with the Raiders entering their second season with Tom Brady being a minority owner, it's going to be interesting to see if the Raiders finally have some direction. And the reason why I'm referencing Tom Brady being a minority owner is because I don't think enough people, unless you truly follow the Raiders, understand just how much say Tom Brady has in all the decisions that have been made from the Raiders front office. This is essentially Tom Brady's team. The reason why Tom Brady was allowed to become the Raiders minority owner at an incredibly discounted rate compared to other minority owners is because Mark Davis said that, if I can't get it right and I can't figure out how to run this team and lead it to success, I'm going to allow the greatest player in NFL history to do it for me. So Mark Davis didn't allow Tom Brady to become the minority owner at a discounted price just simply because he was cool with Tom Brady and wanted to do him a solid. No, he wanted Tom Brady to come in and help turn this thing around. The Raiders have gone 2 decades and some change since they've last won a playoff game. Tom Brady has been allowed to become the minority owner because Mark Davis felt like he was the most qualified in order to turn this thing around. And the thing about Tom Brady is that, everything that he did to become the GOAT, he now has to instill in this organization. He has to take his processes that he used to win all these Super Bowls to become the GOAT and find a way to instill these same processes into the Las Vegas Raiders. Discipline, being able to be focused on the process instead of chasing the long-term goals, because part of obtaining those goals is mastering the process. And the Raiders also need some long-term vision. And with Tom Brady, you hope that he can finally provide the Raiders that. But not every great player ends up being a great leader of an organization. Prime example, Michael Jordan, when he was the owner of the Charlotte Hornets. You would think with Michael Jordan being the greatest NBA player ever that he will be just as good, if not better, as a owner than he was a player. And he was complete opposite. He was the greatest all time to ever touch a basketball probably one of the worst owners in NBA history. Why was that? Because the same thing that made you a great player may not be the same thing that makes you a good owner, because you have to have two different skill sets. Sure, there's a little bit of overlap there, but it's one thing being a player, going about your process a certain way that made you great, and being an owner or being a high-ranking executive or a head coach and being able to take that same process and instill it and spread it around your organization that has success. We already saw Tom Brady strike out last year with the hiring of Pete Carroll and the trade for Geno Smith. It bombed. So year 2, you hire Klint Kubiak and you draft Fernando Mendoza. Now, when it comes to Klint Kubiak, look, nobody, if you are a realistic Raiders fan, is expecting for Klint Kubiak to get the Raiders to the playoffs in year 1. Now, if that happens, you'll love it. It's one of the biggest turnarounds in NFL history. But you are expecting for the Raiders to be a lot more competitive this season than what they were last season. Hell, last season, I thought that they were going to be more competitive than what they actually were under Pete Carroll. But this year's Raiders team has a lot more talent than what they had last year. It feels like this offseason, the Raiders went about their offseason moves with more intention, being more intentional than what they were last year. Last year, it kind of felt like the Raiders were just getting whoever, putting together scraps, just so they can be as competitive as quick as possible, which made a lot of sense because Pete Carroll, with the age, the brother isn't getting any younger. So, of course, you want to try to rebuild the team, speed up the rebuild as fast as possible, but it didn't work out because you can't take shortcuts in this league if you're trying to become a great franchise, especially in a division that's home to 3 franchises right now that have a great shot at winning the AFC. So for the Raiders, the approach they took this offseason was, we're not going to try to fix this team in one offseason. We're going to try to get guys that improve the biggest positions of need that we had last season, which they did that with N'Kobe Dean, Quay Walker, bringing them in at running back, former Georgia teammates. You got a good connection, good camaraderie there. You know, you got a big still in the draft, getting Jamal McCoy. These are the kinds of moves that teams that are trying to build the right way and not trying to chase the overnight success, these are the kind of moves that they make. Drafting Fernando Mendoza with the attention on him redshirting this year is a Tom Brady kind of move, because Tom Brady, when you listen to him talk about the development of young quarterbacks, one thing that he always says is what ruins a young quarterback's development is throwing him out to the wolves before he's ready. He's not going to allow Fernando Mendoza to play this year until he is 100% confident that Fernando Mendoza can handle what comes with being a franchise quarterback. And when you listen to Fernando Mendoza talk, this guy has a lot of things that you love from a franchise quarterback. He kind of gives me a lot of Andrew Luck vibes, but in terms of his attention to detail, his study habits, his preparation habits, he has a lot of similarities to Tom Brady. And I think that's a huge reason why Tom Brady ended up making the decision to tell John Spytek, hey, pull the trigger and take Fernando Mendoza first overall. And Tom Brady seen Fernando Mendoza in person at the national championship up close. He was watching the game from the sideline. So Tom Brady, you kind of trust his judgment when it comes to the quarterback evaluation. I feel Fernando Mendoza is the foundation that the Raiders need to get heading in the right direction. And that's always been the biggest issue with the Raiders. The foundation. They've never been able to build a solid foundation that can last 3-4 seasons plus. It's always more so been, okay, the Raiders are good for this season, and then they bounce back to being irrelevant again. But with drafting Fernando Mendoza, you now have committed yourself to having a long-term foundation now. And that starts with, okay, can we redshirt this guy and develop him behind the scenes? And then when it's his opportunity to start, can we protect our foundation? You know, they signed Tyler Linderbaum in free agency. You still got Coy Miller. You have a much better offensive line now than what you had last season. You got a few good building blocks to build around on offense with Ashton Jeanty and Brock Bowers. So I'm already liking the foundation that John Spytek and Tom Brady have started out with the Raiders this year under new head coach Klint Kubiak. But with Klint Kubiak, although the expectations aren't high, you do expect for him to elevate the Raiders in the division with a bunch of super heavyweights, the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Broncos, to at least have them looking like a middleweight. You're not expecting to go undefeated. You're not expecting to make it to the playoffs, but you want to have an upset win against the Chiefs. You want to have an upset win against the Broncos. And if you're not able to beat those teams, you at least want to say, man, we came very close to giving those teams an L, which would give you a lot more confidence in Klint Kubiak entering year two, because if you have a team that's punching up with its weight class, it gives you more optimism because you're saying, okay, Klint Kubiak is an actual good coach, because last year he came close to winning those games despite the team not really being on par talent-wise. So now we continue to build on the foundation that we laid in his first season, and we continue to build it up to be even stronger. Imagine how good we can be given a good coach who was able to elevate a team that wasn't really that good, actual more talented players. And we actually have a team that could rival the Chiefs or rival the Chargers or rival the Broncos talent-wise. So this season for me, I more so am deciding if 2026 is a success for the Raiders or not, based on if this is finally a stable foundation that can be built upon for 3-4 years down the road. Can they continue to build around Fernando Mendoza? Can they continue to build around beefing up the offensive line, improving his wide receiving core, improving this defense? Can they continue to be patient and allow Klint Kubiak and John Spytek to build this thing up the right way? And with Tom Brady being the main dude in charge, a lot of this is going to fall on him. And I don't think enough people truly realize just how much power, how much say Tom Brady really has as far as everything that's going on with the Las Vegas Raiders. Their decision to trade for Geno Smith, that was approved by Tom Brady. Hell, Tom Brady was trying to recruit Ben Johnson, despite the overwhelming interest he had in coaching the Bears, to try to flip him to coach the Raiders. That's just the Tom Brady charm. So even though Tom Brady has one of the greatest football minds, if not the greatest football mind ever, him being able to transfer that and implement that into the entirety of the Raiders organization, that's easier said than done. So I think this season, I'm not judging the Raiders based off wins and losses. I'm judging based on, does this look like a foundation that can last more than 1 year? Because when you've ran through coaches, like 4 coaches in the last couple of years, yeah, it's going to be hard to become what the Broncos, the Chiefs, and the Chargers have been when you can never give a guy enough time to really build the foundation the right way. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you haven't already, if you're new, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. We talk NFL, college football, all things football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. Make sure you have post notifications turned on so you don't miss when we drop new content. Follow us at JT Sports _ is where you can find us on all of our social media platforms: X, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Also, remember, we are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode along with all of our previous ones in audio format, wherever you get your podcast from, Apple, Spotify. Links are down in the description below. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you guys shortly.